Welcome to Way Back When, Big Blend Radio's history podcast. Today we're going to be talking about family history. Yes, genealogy. We have genealogist Aryn Youngless back on the show, and we're going to talk about what she does as a genealogist, how she helps people, and she's even getting into some teaching part of it, which is kind of cool. For all of us who really enjoy it and have the time to do the research, she can help guide you along. And I encourage you to go to her website, genealogybyaryn.com. That's Aryn. And the link is in the episode notes. So, how are you, Aryn?
I'm well. How are you, Lisa?
Doing good, doing good. I know we said this on a show earlier, our earlier family history panel discussion, which we're going to be doing a lot more of because, oh my gosh, it's just about stories, isn't it? It's like good gossip,
It is.
craziness. It's kind of crazy how things happen. And who knew we were going to have someone who was related to Edgar Allan Poe on the show? Like, what? Yeah.
I know. I love that. I love when you find out things like that, and it's just so amazing. And on top of all, she's also a writer. So is it a
Yeah, and
she?
that's your thing. You're a writer.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really cool. I mean, and but I think she also had some royalty. But as far as I'm concerned, Edgar Allan Poe, he wins.
That's better. He
That's
wins.
just for me anyway. But no, let's go into because you are a writer. Tell us the beginning of you getting into genealogy because I know you're always interested in a whole bunch of things all the time, and the arts. You're always going to museums, and we've been connecting on social media for years. But what was it that said, okay, I'm actually going to go and become a real genealogist, not at home amateur sleuth? Because I
COVID.
can't say amateur sleuth, right? COVID. Oh,
COVID.
yeah.
COVID hit. So like my love of family history goes back to just my childhood because I grew up in a multi-generational family. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother lived with us. So I heard all of the stories of her family growing up in, well, she was a depression baby. She was born in 21, so
Mm,
her elementary former years were during the depression. So I grew up with stories like that, and then as I got older and Ancestry became more available, ancestry.com, um, I started working on my husband's family tree as well because his family's been here in the United States from before it was the United States,
oh, wow.
where my family has been here since 1904.
Okay.
Very,
Okay.
so very different story types. And then COVID hit. And I
Oh,
went
yeah.
from, going to writing events and talking about writing and to having no inspiration because it was not the best time and being a yoga teacher. And then I couldn't teach. And everyone's like,
Yeah,
teach
that's right.
online. And I hated teaching online.
Yeah. Not for
It,
yoga.
it
Yeah.
just didn't. I have friends who do it and they're great at it, but it just did not connect with me. So one day I was talking to my husband and I'm like going back and forth, and I was finally like, maybe I'll just do genealogy. And he's like, go for it. So,
Oh, cool. Good husband.
yes.
Well played. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But then, so you went and you have to like graduate and go to actual like
You
school for
don't.
this. Oh, you
You,
don't?
you don't. I recommend you do.
Okay.
I am going through the process of certification now,
Okay.
but you
Cool.
don't. It's kind of the Wild West with genealogy.
Mm. And it is interesting, yeah, because you get to know, well, you're always posting tips on social media about where archives and where to find family history. That's interesting because I think, I know that Salt Lake City, the LDS Church, am I
Mhm.
saying it right? Yeah,
Yeah.
they pretty much hold like so many records. I don't know how that happened, but they pay, like, I always thought, okay, they own everything. Like, but it's not true.
No, it's not true. And Family Search is actually free for the
Okay.
most part. There are parts of it that you can't see if they haven't digitized it yet. And some things are under lock. So if you'll go on, you'll see a little camera with a lock next to it. But if you go to an affiliate library, like in Los Angeles, the downtown Los Angeles Public Library is an affiliate. So I could just take my laptop, go there and open up all those files I can't open up at home.
Oh, okay, cool.
But
So
then that library is also cool because they have a giant genealogy department. So
fun.
it's a twofer.
Yeah, it was interesting. We cover Natchitoches, Louisiana on the shows all the time. It's the oldest city in the state of Louisiana, and we go there all the we love it. It's just a cool because it's so just diverse, culturally diverse, and it's beautiful. It's hot at this time of year, but it's beautiful. And there's gators, right? So that's important. Alligators always cool. But they actually have genealogy libraries, and that's one of the coolest things. They just had a family reunion. It's this oldest city, but it's not like a city, not like LA or anything. It's like a town. And they have NSU, they have a university there, but they were actually at one point the Red River flowed through there. And so ships would come through, paddle boats and all of that. Then the Red River got clogged by all the lumber, because it's a huge lumber area too.
Mhm.
So now they have what's called Cane River Lake when you go downtown. It's really pretty, but it's like an oxbow, right? But people go there for genealogy all the time. They just had a family reunion of 500 people
That's
in their
amazing.
community. That's pretty darn amazing. And so I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I said to him, well, did they go to the library? Oh, yeah. They have like a folk center, which is a folk life center. So they have a lot of history for Creole history because they got Cajun, Creole, they've got Native American, Indigenous people, Spanish, French, Italian, your side. Everybody's in there because Louisiana was a hotbed of history, and that area being the oldest. I mean, they were settled 1714, I think it is.
Wow.
1714 or 16. So before we became America. And they had an area called No Man's Land when the Louisiana Purchase happened. There was no law and order because they didn't know who owned it anymore. So for 3 years, anybody did whatever they wanted.
No.
Anybody and everybody did. I mean, there was rum running and all kinds of stuff going on. Privateering, because they've got lakes and swamps. So,
Now I have to
you
read
know,
everything about it because that sounds
it's
amazing.
cool. And
Yeah.
the genealogy library, they got two that we went to. And one lady, Cammie Henry, who had a plantation, Melrose Plantation, kept all the newspaper, like every newspaper for years. I mean, old history, clipped it out, especially the funny stuff. And so they come out with gloves on, and you can't touch the book. And
Mhm.
you're just like, dude, this is the coolest thing. You want to just sit and I want to know more about Cammie Henry, you know?
Yeah.
So, and they had artist retreats, like the folk artist Clementine Hunter was there, and she lived on that plantation. They had like anyway, I could go on for years. They have a bicentennial farm from the Prudhommes. And now I'm like, did the race car driver Prudhomme come from there? I mean, who knows?
Right.
So, anyway, when you're there, like, I was like, how many people travel because of their ancestral home? How much the kind of isn't, how many people are not aware of the travelers coming in just for that? You know what I mean? I
Yes,
mean, family reunions, being back at home in an area, not just at people's, so it has an economic impact, I think,
it
family
does.
history.
It does. And ancestral travel is so popular right now.
Mm,
Taking the trip and figuring out where your family came from and going there and being able to walk down the streets that they walk down, or if you're lucky enough, see the houses that they lived in. It's a surreal moment having that
mm,
experience and being able to connect with somebody who died long before you were born, but
yeah,
knowing that this was their home. My husband's family, their family home in Ireland, one of the branches is a pub. And
cool.
yeah, so if we went there, he could go inside his family's home. And I mean, who has
And
that?
have a pint.
And have, yeah, I know, and it's just such a interesting, how many people can do that?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
We apparently have a castle
Oh,
in the
jealous.
Isle of Man. Yeah, but now it's apartment buildings or flats, if however you want to say it. Yeah. And so, and one of the travel writer, we just actually recorded a podcast with her. I said, you just went to the Isle of Man. There's a huge side of our family comes from there. Apparently, we bred Manx cats. That's where all the witches are. And so I'm like, she's like, why didn't you tell me? I'm like, because you were on your family vacation. I don't want to bug you. Like, can you go here? Can you go there? But apparently it's beautiful. But that's the thing. Going there, I know a lady who just came back from Poland, Latvia, and oh my gosh, the history. And she went where her great grandfather was, and she could basically be in their tiny village. And then she went to Auschwitz and everything. She was talking about all these Jewish ghettos, and especially in Poland, like they're trying to bring the Jewish culture back in this area. And
My Eastern European side. was all concentrated in areas that was just ravaged by the Nazis and destroyed. And all of my, if you look at records of the areas my family lived in, it was all cohabitated. So, you know, it was Catholics and Jewish people living together. And the ones who didn't side with the Third Reich got swept into those ghettos. And I found family names in those areas, and it's hard because you don't expect it, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I
You see
didn't
things
expect
on
it.
movies and then you don't find, like, was my family in there? You know?
Yes. I'm glad
Yeah.
that they're trying to bring back that culture, because a lot of the research I've done, there is this unity. There was a great big unity.
Mm.
I feel like that needs to be discussed with neighbors that remained neighbors and didn't buy
Yeah.
into
They're a
the,
village.
yes, and they wanted to remain a village. And if they, you know, sometimes that meant that they had to endure the horrific things that their neighbors endured, but they did that together, or they helped each other get out,
Hmm.
which is also amazing.
Yeah, this lady, and she'll come on a show with us too and talk about her experience because we sat and watched her photos. Like, the day she arrived home, we sat and she put all the photos and she went to like a lot of the cemeteries. So her family members could be in some of these mass graves. I mean, it was sobering. The next day driving out and going to our next destination, I could barely, it just kind of, it was so sobering,
Yes.
and it wasn't my family, but then to see her, she was gone for 2, 3 weeks doing this. That's a heavy, and she's heavy into, her family history, but to be able to where grandfather was, and then there was one ghetto area, and she said like 5 to 6 to 10 families lived in one bedroom kind of apartments. And so you had 5 to 6 rooms in this thing, and they took one whole room. So everybody's cramped,
Mhm.
but they took one room and made it a library.
Oh, that's
Now that
amazing.
isn't that amazing? Like those stories, how often do you see that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But so libraries and education was still at the forefront. That's got to be good for the kids. I mean, you think about Anne Frank, look how literate she was. She
Yes.
was literate and young and smart. And
Yes.
but there were more Anne Franks out there that we probably don't know about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, this is a harsh side of history, but that's the thing. And then you'll find crazy stuff like, Edgar Allan Poe. So
Well, the thing with the hard sides of history is people you want to shield away, like you want to turn away from it. And that could be situations like this, or it can be an ancestor you find out who was just not a nice human being. But
Mhm.
I encourage people to keep going, because beyond those hard moments can be amazing moments and incredible people that you're related to.
Mhm.
And it's worth the effort to get over that hump.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, my best friend, she has royalty. I mean, I'm not kidding. She had plantations in Barbados and all kinds of stuff, like real royalty, British. I mean, it's a big deal. Glenn, Glenn Burrows, you're on the show with him.
yeah.
He took her there. He started looking. He's like, he sends her an email. He says, next time you see Lisa and Nancy, and when you meet me, I'm gonna have to bow, and Nancy and Lisa are gonna have to curtsy. And I'm like, what the hell, Glenn? Don't you tell her that. Don't you tell her that, because she's got that. But then her family has slavery in it.
Yes.
They had slaves back then. And so he says, please don't get upset, though it's not nice, but you can't, don't, you know what I mean? Don't, it's a very hard thing to have that in your family.
Yes.
I mean, you've seen some of our family history isn't the greatest, but don't beat yourself up on it because you don't know what was going on at the time either.
No, I agree.
You just, and then there's things you can celebrate, right? You find out really cool things about really cool people that you may share the same traits. Do you see that with your work where people go, oh my gosh, now I know where my love of this comes from?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen, even on a genetic level, I met one of my DNA cousins, and her and my dad have
Wow.
the same color eyes.
Wow.
And it's just crazy because, I didn't anticipate that. But like, as soon as she turned and looked at me, I was like, whoa, that's insane. My dad has the exact same shade eye as you. And it's unique because it's gray with a little bit of green.
Oh, cool.
So it's just a unique eye color that's not very common. So seeing that in somebody that I've never met before was very interesting. I've also through talking to people and just different types of research, seen anxiety be passed down through generations, and
Mm.
ADHD. And
Really? So like
yeah,
how long back? How far back? Because I
well,
always wonder about that. How many things were out there that we don't know about, or is it a common new modern problem?
I don't
You
think
know?
it's a common new modern problem. I think that we put a name on it because I don't think, I know when I was a kid that no, if my behavior was seen as disruptive in class, where I was bored
Yeah.
and I just, as
Yeah,
you
me
said,
too.
I always want to go, 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 and no, no, no. And then when I had a son and they were like, oh, he has ADHD, I was like, maybe I should get checked.
Mm,
And like, but then talking to other relatives and hearing other stories and similar behavior, similar, I can't say
mm.
100%, but it's just kind of coincidental that we all acted the same way.
Right. And because we have more medical knowledge now than what we did back then. But
Yes.
this, so a lot of people do their ancestry for medical reasons and the DNA and everything, and then kind of go in that way and then go down a rabbit hole? Do you find
Uh,
that?
I find that a lot of people do the ancestry DNA because they just want to know where they came from, and then they don't go back online, which go back
Okay.
online. Please go back online and talk to people.
Oh,
Be-
okay.
because they go on and it's a mixed, when you do that, the issue is that um, you have to take into account how many people have been tested at whoever you're testing with. So if your family members and descendants haven't tested, they're not going to show up in the database.
Okay.
You have to take into account that humans have always been transient. So like when I did my family, part of my Italian heritage comes up as Greek, but look how close Greece is to Italy.
Hmm.
I mean, it's everybody was moving around. There were trade routes there. So it makes a lot of sense that
Mm.
that would show up in my history. But people go, "Oh, I didn't know I was from Greece." It's like, well, you're not. That's when you start
Okay.
following the paper trail and you see this long paper trail that says, no, you're from Italy.
Okay. So you have to do both to get it right.
Yes.
So that okay, let's actually start there. You know, I know Nancy and I have all these wild stories passed down, and we don't know what's true because everyone argues about it. Some of it we have actually seen in publications, so we know some of it's true. And actually in museums, our own history out there, being in, the Museum of the Occult is quite nice. That was fun to have a family exhibit in there. I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, I know we are about to do that. That was our thing that this year we're going to do our DNA. And so where do you go from there? I mean, how does someone get started? Do you start with DNA? I mean, some people start doing the family dabbling around, just Google searches. But where, for someone just getting started at all, what would you recommend doing? Because I know you guide people with that process, right? Because a lot of us
Yeah.
don't have time to sit at the computer and do that and
No.
all of.
Honestly, the number one place to start is at home and with you.
Okay.
So the person you know the most about is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of us know who our parents are. We know at least who a parent is or a grandparent. So
Mm-hmm.
you can start writing it down. You don't need fancy software or online subscriptions. They're nice, they're helpful, but you don't need them.
Okay.
And so starting with yourself, looking through all of those vital records you have at home, and
Mm-hmm.
we take for granted that they're there. And I don't think a lot of times people sit down and actually look at their birth certificate, but there's all sorts of information on it. There
Mm.
are your parents' names, there's where you were born. There is some older ones, there's the time you were born. I don't think they do it that so much nowadays, but back in the 70s they did. And then asking your parents, interviewing your relatives. You were saying, you and Nancy, you talk a lot about your family history, and that is a great place to start because when you have those stories, it gives you a place to start
Mm-hmm.
researching. Like in my family, I had a great aunt named Pauline, but her birth name was Pamela, and no one could remember what month and day she was born. They knew it was 1917, but no one knew what month and day. Well, Palmela means palm in Italian because she
Mm-hmm.
was born on Palm Sunday.
Oh,
So all you have to do is take a calendar, go back to 1917, and there's her birthday. It's when Palm
wow.
Sunday is.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's it's fascinating because like I know my grandmother would always say, "Yeah, we've got Lewis and Clark stock in us." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "We're related." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "No, we are." And then when I sent you something and I was like looking, just did a quick search online, lo and behold, there's a Clark. And I'm like, what do you mean there's a Clark? Really? You know? And then
Mhm.
like and it goes with our personality, but who knows? Or maybe there's a Clark and I know our sense of humor is like, oh, we got the Lewis and Clark.
You may.
But you never know,
You
right?
never
But
know.
you don't know, but I know our family's history in humor is that's just you don't know what's a story or what's not. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's a really interesting thing. I think doing the DNA can help. So you do that. Is it the 23andMe? Who should we go to, do you think, for that?
Ancestry has the largest database. So
Okay.
they have upwards of 22 million. I may actually be higher than that. I haven't looked in a while.
Wow.
Yes. So when COVID hit, a lot of people went out and got their DNA tested, which is fantastic because the more people who are testing, the more, yeah, you learn. So you'll
More
get
leads you
updates.
have.
Okay? So if
Yeah.
you went on and you tested 2 years ago, every 6 months they update. So you'll
Oh,
see
wow.
subtle changes and you'll see that's how I've learned everything about my paternal grandmother's mother's side of the family has all been by using DNA and just connecting people and a lot of guesswork and a lot of shuffling paper around. But with Ancestry, you can download your raw DNA from there and you can upload it to other places. So if
Okay.
you start with Ancestry and you're like, I'm not getting results, you can download that DNA and for free, you can upload it to places like GEDmatch, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA. MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA sell their own kits, but you don't need to buy it because you can just upload yours there.
Okay. Okay. So you just go. So once you get it done, it's done.
Yes.
Okay. So when you do the DNA, like, Nancy first thing is like, are there injections involved? I'm not doing she's a baby and I don't blame her, but what happens with that? It's just a swab in your mouth, right?
You
That goes,
you spit in a tube.
oh, you spit. Oh, she might
Mhm.
enjoy that.
Yeah, you spit in a tube and then there's solution and you shake it all up and you drop it in the mail and it takes I want to say it takes 3 to 6 months.
Oh, okay.
It
So
takes
it's
a
not
little
an
while
overnight thing.
because there's so many people who've been doing it
Okay.
that it depends. I don't want to say that it's shorter than that because the times do vary. It could take 2 months, but it may take upwards of six just because of influx of people taking the test.
Oh, that's good to know. That's really good
Mhm.
to know.
Also
Okay.
look for holidays. I know we passed Mother's Day and Father's Day, but Labor Day, they go on sale.
Oh, that's a good tip for
Yeah.
people. Hey, my birthday's over that time frame. See, we said it was because our birthdays, and we both have big birthdays this year. We don't want to talk about that number, but we thought we better find out who we are as we as we head over the hills. Um, so when people do that, so when your clients typically are they people who've done it and then start getting involved in researching and need to kind of understand what they're looking at? Because some of it doesn't, I don't understand. Like I'm looking at stuff and I don't know what the heck's going on. It looks like math to me
Oh, the
at times.
DNA?
Yeah, or just going online and seeing family things and all that. I don't know what's going on. I have no clue what I'm looking at. Unless it's like, some of the how it all works, how the lines and I don't get it. Oh, I'm not.
The pedigree? Okay. With
Oh, the pedigree. Oh, we get to be
mhm.
pedigreed dogs.
Super
Yes.
funny that it's pedigree started as a term for genealogy, and over time it became known as we see, as you said, as with dogs. But the original meaning of the word had to do with like royalty,
Yeah.
and
What's
and
your pedigree? Yeah.
and now it's come down to puppies, but also your pedigree line. So
Yeah.
um, you don't need DNA to do genealogy.
Okay.
If you want to, you're welcome to. that is it's just not mandatory. I like it because I love all of that stuff and I want to know more and more and more. Um, so you can do both. You can just do the paper trail. It's whatever you want. With the pedigree, usually a pedigree means you're going from parent to child or child to parent. So it's a
Okay.
direct line. So instead of going and having a giant tree where you have mom and dad, aunts and uncles, cousins, and because it can be large depending on who your family is. I've seen trees where a husband and wife each have 15 siblings. So it's
Ooh,
just like you can't even see it on the tree because it just keeps going and going. So when you go back, it'll be, from parent or from child to parent, making your way
okay.
back.
Yeah, it's just recently when I did that, when I saw the Clark thing, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on. The way they listed it didn't, wasn't I wasn't familiar with that kind of thing. And then for me, I've always kind of just researched the stories and found people,
Mhm.
but you found stuff about you found dirt
About
on our family. I'm like, dang, dang.
I did.
Okay.
I found interesting. You know what I learned today? In 1947, Southern California established the Southern California Humane Society.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
good timing, isn't it?
Yeah, in 1947.
Wow.
Do you want me to
That
share that
connects with
story?
no.
Okay.
Not yet.
So
Not well, no, you can. I mean, that was it passed, but I'd want to do it on a show where we all share each other's kind of stories, but and
okay.
when
Well,
Nancy's
we'll
part of
circle
that.
back to that one.
Yeah.
To be
But
continued.
to be continued. Yes, we have Humane Society drama in our family. And here we are, pets sitting across the country.
Well, see,
But we are animal people.
you are
That's, I mean,
animal
that's
people.
well, our witches come from being burned at the stake for being for talking to animals.
Yeah.
So that was
And
considered witchcraft back in the
was
day.
your family in that? So your witches are in Europe?
Uh, Wales. And the
Okay.
lady I just talked to today, I mean, not Wales, sorry, the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
And she said there was a whole thing, they mentioned witches and then they kind of like brushed over it. Didn't want to. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's my family, man. Okay, we'll go there. No, no, the Humane Society. So actually, that is important. I mean, so apparently my grandfather had a pet store and wasn't around, and that's what happened. So we can say that, right? Um, but the timing is weird. It's real, but it's kind of weird in so this was before Nancy was born.
Yes. It
And
appears his actions are what led to that.
yeah, little newspaper clipping.
Yeah.
See, that's how I've gone through. That's how I've found stuff is that kind of thing more.
I love
And
finding stuffs in newspapers because pre-social media, that's where all of the, people hear the gossip pages and they automatically think of celebrities, but reality was that was everybody's. If your parents went to visit your sister in the next town, chances are it said in the newspaper, Mr. and
mhm.
Mrs. Smith are here to see Anna. And so you could follow their movements and see who was in town and who was visiting who. And I love all of that. That's so
Oh
amazing.
man, newspapers are cool because it's
They
full of
are.
gossip, scandals, what was going on in the town, even the writing, because the writers, I interviewed an author recently, Clay Schwab, about his family, Manny Schwab, and the Dickens Company. And basically, this was Jack Daniels, the Jack Daniels of Tennessee, in the Nashville Gilded Age of Nashville, Tennessee. And his family, they were moonlighting, like really taking shine, and they were doing all kinds of things. And then the company was set up through laundering money with a guy who literally, and it's a law. The Manny Schwab and the Dickel Company. I don't know if it's it's Dickel because I said Dickens when I interviewed him. He said he went his it's his great grandfather. This guy was like the entrepreneur of Nashville, but no one knows about him. But he was in everything. He was, but so he went into all the newspapers and he said the hardest part writing the book was he was just so interested in the newspapers because he said the writing is so much better back then. They were writers. They kind of gave you a texture and a feel of what the town was like or what was going on
Yeah.
versus just the facts, ma'am. You know.
That's yeah, pre-internet. You could see it in movies, newspapers, magazines, because nowadays we take the internet for granted, and we go, oh, well, we don't have to tell them what that looked like or sounds like because they can just look it up. So we'll just tell you the facts.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
that's kind of, yeah, he
Sad.
said it was so much better. It's so much more entertaining. But yeah,
One of a friend of mine, I researched his family and I found out one of his relatives, his like great great grandfather was in the Civil War in the Union. And he was part of the 182nd OVI. And in his town, the newspaper editor went with them. So he was reporting back and somebody took it all and made it into a book. So there's publications about this, and I can't find anything about them in the Library of Congress. I've called, written,
mhm.
emailed, talked to everybody I can. Well, we have nothing about the 182nd. And I think that's the way it's 182nd or 185th. But there's this book for 99 cents. So there's these great stories about them showing up at basic training and they're playing tricks on each other. And some guy put dots on his face and pretended he had smallpox and ha ha ha. And yeah,
Wow,
it's so
cool.
interesting to have that viewpoint instead of the normal Civil War stories we hear. I mean, there were funny stories in there and it was just written by the editor and it was in the paper. So he was sending it home so everybody in town knew who was doing what and everybody was okay.
That's amazing, huh?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Those kind of things. That's the fun stuff. Yeah, when it's all the chart, you know what? I have an aversion to charts. I don't even do Excel sheets. So I'm very weird. So that's probably the thing. As soon as it starts getting technical, I'm like, okay, I'm going to call Aryn on that. So do you get people like me who don't want to do that part? That
Yeah.
mhm,
I think sometimes it can be confusing. I've seen trees on Ancestry and on Family Search that don't make any sense whatsoever because people put people in the wrong spot. I've found ones with grandparents who have their kids listed as their siblings and I think it can be confusing. And
mm,
that's why it's important to have citations and have facts and have pieces of paper that say this is who is related to this. Vital records, birth, marriage, and death are a great place to start. Newspapers,
mhm.
passenger lists. Did you know that the New York Times, during the height of all the passenger ships coming in through Ellis Island, used to have articles in the paper about this ship is in town. It just entered the port. It came from blah, blah, blah. And you can look at that paper and say it was this temperature that day. This is the social climate.
Wow, this is what
Here's
it
what
felt like.
people are wearing because it's all in the newspaper. And it's
That's so
amazing.
cool. That the newspapers are cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found stuff from some of our family years ago, and I have it. I'm in Tucson. I should go pull out my storage unit and go and get it because I have files of it. And it's fascinating. And then we even talked to psychics, one psychic actually, medium, and have you ever heard of people doing that in their
Yes.
genealogy?
Um, I can't say I've heard people doing that, but I've been intrigued by that. Sometimes I
It's
like to
interesting.
watch haunted shows and they'll be like, this place is haunted. And then I'm like, well, let's figure out the history of that place.
Yeah.
Why would this be haunted? Who lived there? And, sometimes I find stuff and sometimes I'm like, you're just making it up for TV.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, right.
yeah,
No, we had a friend. Uh, honestly, there were two incidences with her doing readings for my mom and Nancy's even more, especially like, yeah, 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 yeah. Right. We also lived in a haunted cabin at that time in Julian in San Diego in the mountains. And you're not going to tell either one of us when there is a smoky face over your bed over you. And then she drew the face and showed it to the landlord. And it's exactly what his father looked like. And he
oh
was
wow.
buried just 10 feet down the dirt path.
That's
So, like, don't tell me it's not. I know that there's stuff, right? And anyway, so we were starting in our family history. So she really was more about guided meditation,
Mhm.
so that you can kind of travel that way and going in that and what she thought. The history I was digging up, and this was kind of at the beginning of the internet too. Um, there's no way she had time to do what I was doing, and you know what I mean,
Mhm.
and had all the names or anything. And she did come up with some stuff that aligned with what I was finding. But I hit a stumbling block at the 1400s. That was hard to get beyond that. So I
It,
don't know what
well, that
is
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
Paper, you start losing the paper trail.
Hmm. And so that's how I did it. But I have the file, But when it gets into all the charts and stuff, I'm like, that's when you call someone. So who is your typical client for you when you help them as a genealogist?
I've had so many different varieties. I've had people who wanted me just to build out their family trees and came to me with two names and question marks, and I think they lived here and then. To I've had people come to me because they have a family name and they wanted to carry that family name down, and it's been 5 or 6 generations that everybody was named Mary, and they wanted to have
Oh,
a
wow.
and I think they made it back eight generations. And
Wow.
yeah, very cool. And I've had people come to me for help with getting dual citizenship, finding the documentation that they need to prove their lineage. Um,
Oh, okay.
mhm, for Ireland and for Italy and
Oh,
Greece
wow.
and Greece. Um, so it depends on what I've had people come to me because they just really love their grandma, wanted to know more about the family, but she never really talked about the family
Mm.
and
Is it hard for people that are adopted?
I've never really worked with anybody. I worked with one young woman. And she reached out to me online because she was trying to figure out who the paternity her father was, and I helped her, but was just that was just a one off. I She wasn't
Okay.
even really my client. It just
Okay. Just helping.
I just wanted to help her out because she was
Mm,
asking other people for help and they kept ignoring her. So I helped her. So I mean,
mm.
DNA is great for that. If you have a line of your family that you don't know things about and no one wants to talk about, DNA is fantastic for that.
Ah, yeah. Because sometimes there's little secrets in your family and people don't want to share them.
There are so
Um,
many secrets that come
hmm
out.
Yeah. And but I think that's interesting, you know?
I
So
agree. I agree, but
it,
it's not everybody does. The people who want to keep the secret don't find that
I
interesting.
want to know, like, it's weird because, like our family says, oh, we've got that on the Ernie side that you researched up a little bit that, somebody married a Paiute squaw. That's what has been passed down, terminology and all, right? And there's certain things. I have a book about Paiute history, and there is a Paiute warrior, and we look identical, creepily, like identical, like whoa, right?
That's cool.
Um, and so, but then like three-quarters of the family, oh no, we're not, definitely not. Nobody did that. And I'm like, oh, I wonder. I mean, I don't care either way. I mean, it is what it is, right? But that apparently was a secret or something. We'll see. I don't know. I
You'll know
wouldn't.
when you get the DNA done.
Yeah, I know, right? And it won't be. I'll just look like some dude, guy. He was a warrior. He was all dressed up, and I'm looking at his face, cheekbones, everything. It's really odd, you know.
That's very cool though.
Yeah, so maybe I am, I don't know, but it's fascinating. And so I'm glad that you help people because I can see people really wanting the stories and wanting to know but not having the time to do it, or just need help along the way. So if someone go to your website and says, hey, can you just guide me because I don't know what I'm looking at, because that's what I was saying, like there's things I don't know what's going on, what am I looking at? Will you help people with that kind of thing, like consulting?
I'm gonna hopefully start consulting in the next month or so. So instead of doing all of the research on my own, it would be assisting people so they could bring
Mm,
their research to me and I can help them
yeah.
navigate where to go next and maybe help them reorganize.
Mm,
Organize.
ah.
Organization is, you may think you're going to remember something, you're probably not. Write it
Mm,
down because there's just so much information. But
mm,
yeah, I hope to be doing more of a consulting on top of what I'm already doing to
mm.
help people along the path so they can. It is exciting. Some people are really just drawn to doing the research themselves,
Yeah,
and
it's your family, story.
it
So
is.
you
I
get
think
you
there's
get into
also
that.
a level of healing that some
Mm-hmm.
people find when they're doing their family history and having this connection with your past, where you
Mm-hmm.
came from, finding a community, even
Yeah.
in paper or in the genealogy community, because people who aren't into genealogy they are missing out, but they just don't want to hear you drone on. I know this
Yeah,
firsthand. So when you find other people in the genealogy community, they can, they're there to celebrate you, and they
it's
do.
rabbit hole centric.
It
That's
is. It's a great feeling when you can sit down and be like, I was at the cemetery the other day. You'll never
yeah,
guess what I found. And
yeah,
that
yeah. No, that's
go,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, we just went to cemetery where Abraham Lincoln's relative and Truman's relative were buried. Tiny little cemetery in Kentucky.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It I mean, it was just, and then they had a tree growing from the acorn, seriously, from an acorn from oak tree from where Lincoln spoke. So they took this acorn and grew it in the cemetery.
Oh, that's really
It,
cool.
it is, and it's a really beautiful oak tree. So it's, and these old, I love cemeteries. I could live in the cemeteries. Like I like just going to them. This is where you, especially if you go on a guided tour, because these historians know the gossip of the town.
Mhm.
You know, they know who did what. I mean, Natchitoches, Louisiana, I was talking about that, and I've been on a cemetery tour recently there, and I've been in the cemetery a few times, but man, the story that came out, I mean, the mayor got shot because he got mad at somebody for faking the fountain of youth with his well. And so the guy got mad and just shot him. I mean, and then there's like a Civil War soldier. He was a young kid, faked his age so he could fight in the Civil War. And so he has two gravestones, one with his real name and one with a fake name.
Oh, that's funny. That's crazy. I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
that.
because he changed his name to fake his age.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
I love
because it was illegal.
cemeteries. We're actually going east in a couple weeks to Salem, Massachusetts. And I'm very, very
Cool.
excited to go check out the cemeteries in
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
Don't eat the rye bread. You
Why
might
not?
be called, because you might be called a witch after you eat it,
Oh, I'm sure
you
I'll be
know.
called a witch before I eat it, so it's okay.
I know, I know. I'll pass on some of our witchdom to you. Well, this is cool. I'm so glad you're doing that and helping people. And I'm excited because I know you'll be on more shows talking family history so we can get into the nitty-gritty of gossip. It'll be good. You know,
Yes,
that'll be fun. A lot of fun. And I'll get our friend Faye to come on and talk about Poland and that history because that is insanely like some people are living in the barrio and don't even know what their building is and
yes,
represents, you know? Um,
that's great.
yeah,
Yeah, I would love
yeah.
that. I would love to hear what she saw and just the
It was,
experience of it.
she said a lot of it was deep. It's emotionally deep, you know? And then going to these little villages and knowing that her relatives were there, you know, and it just is like, wow, you
Mhm.
know, because she's got a Russian Jewish background.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I when she came back, all these stories, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I need help on this. This is because they were crossing all the border lines, you know, and so, you know, trying to get out, and they were fine. They didn't end up in Auschwitz. She said Auschwitz, she had to leave a few times. It's too much.
I don't
That
know that I
history,
could.
yeah. And then you got to look at those that fought under Hitler, the Nazis, right? Like how many of those were people who really didn't want to be a Nazi? I think that story never gets told.
I
It's
agree.
kind of what's happening with Putin right now. You know, what's happening in Russia. Do they all, I mean, there's soldiers saying no. You know what I
Yes,
mean? So there is that backlog. So it's kind of interesting. It's just like history is really repeating itself in a horrible way.
I agree.
But and I
It's
think when
weird.
you learn, if you go in history, you start to understand humans a little bit more too.
Well, that's the other reason family history is so interesting and unique, because when you go to school and they start teaching you about history, it's a lot of numbers and facts, and it gets really boring because who is this guy and do
Yeah.
you care? But when it's your family and you learn that it's your, uncle or your grandmother, or there was another family that I researched, and the great grandmother had a husband before. And why? Well, her first husband died of the Spanish flu. So then she remarried with her two daughters, and that was where the line came down to the person I was helping. But I mean, that's a whole different idea. You hear about it stopped, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
not Spanish flu, the influenza outbreak of 1918 is what the more appropriate way to say it. But I mean, learning about that and how it swept through the steel mills and seeing
Oh,
it from a hands-on perspective, or the wars, the different, when you go on and you see the World War II draft card that everybody filled out, but then suddenly you see these forms about having trench foot because your family member
yeah.
ended up in triage in a hospital somewhere because they were, yeah, I mean, like that's
It
totally
becomes personal.
becomes very personal. It
Hmm.
becomes very personal, and
Yeah.
it makes you want to learn more about it.
Well, as a kid, I was engrossed in historical novels. Like I mean, I read War and Peace when I was like 8 years old or something
Wow.
stupid. Then I had to read it again, right? But I was into all of that. And then in school, in high school, you'd think I'd, you know, no. I was so bored. They made it so boring. And it is like this, Christopher Columbus sailed his ship on whatever. I just it like everything was just here's your paragraph of what happened. World War II. Okay, you may get a full page on that.
Yes.
But it didn't make it into a story.
No.
And that's what history is. And then when we traveled the country in South Africa and we lived there, and as a kid, I was like 13, 14 at the time, we went to some of these battlefields, and it was stuff that I was studying in school, and I was truly a Rhodes Scholar. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, this is like, why aren't they writing this? This is for real. And came back, and I graduated at the top of history, was my top subject, a higher standard grade or higher grade or whatever you want to call it. That was my main thing. I don't know
That's
if you call it
amazing.
a
Yeah.
major or whatever. Everything was different. But history, it just went from there to there just by going to the places to find the real stories.
Hmm.
And then being horrified by seeing mass graves
Yes.
just with whitewashed pebbles on them, you know,
I
and then
think that's
seeing the places where people battled, like it's
yes.
insane. I
That's what
mean, you think about
my family.
Gettysburg. Ah,
My family growing up, my dad was always into history. He's still into history. So when we would go on family vacations, we went to Gettysburg and we went to Vicksburg and we
uh,
went to DC and we saw the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And we've been to a lot of different places like that. It was funny because, like I said, I'm going to Salem, and I called my mom. I'm like, I remember going to Salem when I was a kid. And she's like, you were 3. I'm like, that is how impactful that experience was, that a 3-year-old remembered this so
mm,
many years later. And I think then learning your family was part of that, changes it. And it also expands history because there's so much history we're not taught. When
right.
you start looking at the diversity of our country, there's so many stories and so many people who've done amazing, incredible things that we don't ever learn about because we keep hearing the same 5 stories over and over again. And
And
they,
now some of those stories are being taken out of history books.
mhm, that shouldn't be,
So
because we need to learn them so they
yeah,
don't
good,
repeat.
bad, and the ugly, right?
Yes.
We need to learn all of it. And I think that's the only way for everyone to kind of reunite.
What's the saying? If history doesn't make you uncomfortable, it's not history.
Well, I don't know. The the present moment's a little uncomfortable. So but history, but then here's the thing, like I was talking to someone, they were saying, we are actually doing better than what we all think. You know, if you look at back in history, I mean, women couldn't really walk down the street and get raped by a Roman soldier or something. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
if you really think about it, with all the way disease was, I mean, we have flushing toilets. There's things that we've changed, and some of it is really for the better. There's definitely a lot of horror stories, but there really are horror stories now too.
Yes.
But I think there's a lot of betterments, you know.
I
So
agree. I think, and I'm going to circle back to newspapers for a minute. I think reading old newspapers is very interesting because you have perspective now.
mm,
So we can see what was going on then and have enough perspective to say, oh, that wasn't really happening. That was just the newspapers because it helps sell the newspapers.
mm,
And when you're living in it, it's hard to see you don't have that distance to have the perspective to understand that there's probably a better or bigger story that needs to be investigated. And it's not just the stories that are selling newspapers.
Mm, yeah, that's true too.
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, yeah, we like the textures and the flavorings, but there's more. There's
There
always
is.
more. Yeah. And you know what? The true story is actually usually more interesting,
They are.
you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really true. But hey, we're fascinating human beings. We're fascinating and we do some weird stuff.
Amen to that.
Yeah, we do. Well, thank you, Aryn. We can't wait for more. Have fun on your travel to Salem. Yes, that's going to
Thank
be
you.
fun. They make good candy out there, I hear. I'm
Well, I will have to get some and send it to you.
okay, cool. All right. Thanks. You take care.
You too.
Thank you for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's Way Back When History Podcast. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.